Tonight's council meeting. This is the 26th meeting of the 144th Council of the Corporation of the City of St. Thomas on a very rainy and now beautiful day outside since we all had to come inside and work. Any disclosures of interest from any of the members? Seeing none, we'll go to minutes.
I have a motion that the minutes of the meetings held on June 17th and 24th, 2024 be confirmed. Moved by Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next order of business are presentations. We have one presentation to make this evening, and that's to present a civic award to Judy Thorner, if she wouldn't mind coming forward. Judy, in recognition of your outstanding dedication and unwavering commitment to health and well-being of our community through your many years of selfless volunteer service at the St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital Foundation.
Well, great. Judy and I go back to when she was only 12 and I was older. We're working on the United Way many years ago. I know Rose, were part of that too. And then, I knew you through the school board and the work you did there. And now at the hospital, 9 years, you said?
8 years.
8 years. Okay, well then you have to stay at least another year. So the man's not a liar. Okay, perfect. So this civic award recognizes your contributions to the city of St. Thomas over the years. And we have a great civic award pin for you too.
Thank you.
Now, do you have we always say we love to be recognized here, but we don't make mistakes that would then be punished.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Next item.
Council will now resolve itself into committee of the whole to deal with the following business. First committee this evening is strategic direction and development. First item relates to the community improvement plan, heritage facade and building improvement grant for the property at 309 Talbot Street. I have a motion that report PD 2224 relating to the community improvement program heritage facade and building improvement grant for 309 Talbot Street be received for information. And further, the council direct that a bylaw be prepared to enter into a community improvement program grant acknowledgement agreement with 1237166 Ontario Limited relating to community improvement plan application 2023-132. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Macaulay.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
The next 4 items relate to notice of a public meeting to take place by Zoom on July 25th, 2024 at 10 a.m. received from the Committee of Adjustment. The first one is for an application for a minor variance by Andrew and Peter Sherman to permit an addition to the residence 5 meters from the rear lot line, whereas the minimum rear yard depth is 10.5 meters at 30 Mandeville Road. The second, also for a minor variance by Aislinn Burkholder to permit a 3-season mudroom 4.15 meters from the front lot line, whereas the minimum front yard depth is 6 meters at 18 Erie Street. The third one is for minor variance by 100046056 Ontario Limited to permit 6 dwelling units in an apartment dwelling, whereas the maximum number of dwelling units is 4 at 96 Fairview. The last one for this meeting is for minor variance by Ryan and Laura Dolby to permit a driveway width of 7.97 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw defines a residential driveway width as 6 meters at 12 Thorman Terrace. The next 2 are notices from the Committee of Adjustment for its meeting on August the 8th, 2024 at 10 a.m. First is for a minor variance by Janet Crossett to permit a 2-story residential addition of 4.42 meters from the rear lot line, whereas the minimum rear yard depth is, 10.5 meters, and a 2nd-story porch balcony, 3.05 meters from the rear lot line, whereas the minimum rear yard depth is 8 meters at 237 Sunset. And then the last notice is for consent by 5052713 Ontario Inc. to create an easement over part of the property at 57 Walnut Street to allow the owners of 55 Walnut Street access to maintain a church building.
Councillor Peters, on the Committee of Adjustments.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Not speaking to any one of them, and they all seem of a nature of a minor variance.
Right.
We've also had some come forward that have turned into be contentious issues like 30 South Edgeware, where that came from a Committee of Adjustment to us, and then we ended up before an LPAT hearing on that one. And I would be interested to hear from the city manager his thoughts, his experience of how Committee of Adjustment has been dealt with in perhaps some of the municipalities that he's served in the past, and whether we just maintain status quo or we look at something different. And I'm not looking for a fulsome discussion or answer tonight. It might be something he reports back on, but so it's a general nature question about Committee of Adjustment. Thanks, Your Worship.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Peters, because that same discussion and with the city manager and I took place today too. So city manager, your thoughts?
Through you, Your Worship, and I think it's a good discussion topic. So just to for a little bit of background, and Mr. Pompili might want to help me out with this, but through the Planning Act, council can create a Committee of Adjustment to hear minor planning matters, and specifically consents and those planning matters that fall into the test of a minor variance. The notion of why you would do this is it takes minor matters out of the council chamber, things like fence, fence heights and setbacks and things like that, which can be quite numerous, and it moves them to another committee so that the council of the day isn't burdened by what you would look at as small items. Noting that council would deal with the larger items, the zoning bylaw amendments and official plan amendments and major planning matters. So it's at council's discretion whether you want to have a Committee of Adjustment to hear these matters, or whether council wants to hear them yourselves. But you can't do both. You kind of have to pick one course, have a Committee of Adjustment, or not have a Committee of Adjustment and hear those things yourself. So if there's an interest, Mr. Pompili and I were talking this afternoon, there's probably some room to have a look at Committee of Adjustment here in the city of St. Thomas. And if there's interest, we'd be happy maybe later this year to bring a report back just to analyze what we're currently doing and maybe some best management practices we could consider.
Well, I'd be prepared to say, yes, let's do some of that. Councillor Clark?
Thanks. Some of these items that we may consider minor variances might not be so minor to the neighbors, et cetera. So I was just wondering, I know we were talking about updating our bylaws, and I was just wondering for the public's sake, if we could give some idea of the timelines. So, lots are getting smaller. People are wanting sheds and they don't want as much grass to cut. Cars and trucks are getting bigger. So I know we were going to review this, and I'm just wondering where we're at with that.
On that, Lou? Sure. Mr. Pompili?
Yeah, through your worship. Yeah, no, good question. We have raised that before. What we're doing, we're monitoring the types of variants that we deal with, so that when we do update our zoning bylaw, we know typically what regulations we have in place that we know need to be updated. And you'll see on the agenda, some of the notices deal here with rear yard setbacks. Rear yard setbacks in some of our bylaws are pretty extensive, 10.5 meters, whereas in most urban areas, a rear yard setback is 6 meters, 5 meters. So that's where a lot of the variances come in. So those updates will be part of our new zoning bylaw consolidation update that we'll be doing once our OP is completed. We're mandated to do that. That's probably something that we'll likely be doing within the next year, 2 years. But we are tracking the types of variances that are being requested, so we know where some of those deficiencies are with our bylaw.
Great. Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. If we decide to vote against a few of these, is there an appeal process at all for these people? Can they appeal our decision?
Through your worship, I'm assuming you're referring to the Committee of Adjustment, these applications that are, these notices that are before you. The notices that are before you are really here so that council is informed in terms of what minor variance applications the committee will be dealing with. So if there's something of interest to you, something you've heard of from your constituents or that just interests you, you can attend those meetings and on behalf as a counselor or as a ratepayer, and comment on that. As far as the appeals, a committee, members of the public are no longer allowed to appeal a Committee of Adjustment decision. There are only groups of classes of bodies that can appeal. Municipal council is one of them. So if council doesn't support a decision of the Committee of Adjustment one way or another, they can appeal that decision.
Okay, Councillor Peters?
Yeah, thanks, your worship. And just hearing that comment right there where the public is now shut out of the process, I think merits having staff come back to us with a report as to what potential options are, because we might be that last line of defense, as sort of what Councillor Clark is speaking of where it may appear minor to us, but you know, I think of the one on there going from 4 units to 6 units on Fairview. Somebody on either side of that may not be impressed of having a 6-unit apartment beside them. So I would support staff coming back with something.
Okay, so we'll look forward to that as we look further into our agendas and the governance of the bylaws. And as Mr. Pompili said, the OP over the next couple of years. Great. Next item.
Your worship, unless there are any further items from the members for this committee, we'll now move into community engagement and services. First item relates to the 2024 Declaration of Compliance for Valley View. I have motion that report VV0324 relating to the 2024 Declaration of Compliance be received for information, and further that council approve the compliance declaration for Valley View Home and authorize staff to forward it to Ontario Health, and further that a bylaw be prepared to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the declaration of compliance. Moved by Councillor Baldwin-Sand, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Questions or comments? Well, something, so Michael has to come up and talk to us. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Your worship, unless there are any further items from the members under this particular heading, we'll now move into infrastructure and civic operations. First item relates to a request for drainage for the Yarmouth Yards storm sewer system to the Norman Drain. I have motion that report ID 2424 relating to the appointment of an engineer for Yarmouth Yards storm sewer system to the Norman Drain be received for information, and further the council endorse the request for drainage improvements under Section 4 of the Drainage Act to connect the Yarmouth Yards storm sewer system to the Norman Drain, and further that John Spreet of Spreet and Associates be appointed to prepare an engineer's report for this petition. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Kohler.
Questions or comments? Councillor Peters?
Your worship, I think Councillor Wookey and I may have sat once as a drainage committee. So is that something we're going to have to strike again? I think it was the first time in history that the drainage committee had met.
There is not much meeting of drainage committees, but I would expect there's a lot of people talking about drainage today. I saw a number of streets in a city north of us that were having some real trouble draining today. So, Mr. Lawrence, would you like to help us with drainage?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I believe that in this case, it would be Central Elgin. So the drain is in Central Elgin. In St. Thomas, in Yarmouth Yards, we'll be abandoning all the drains. And so the outlet basically at the southeast corner of the subdivision travels down Central Elgin Road to a Central Elgin municipal drain. So that's the purpose.
Madam Clerk?
Your worship, since it involves both municipalities, when it comes time, I believe Councillor Wookey will be involved in that drainage process.
Okay, you got work. Anything else on the drain? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to the water pollution control plant optimization and odor control project agreements. I have motion the report ES 3424 relating to the water pollution control plant optimization and odor control project agreements be received for information. And further, council authorize a single source contract with RV Anderson Associates Limited in the amount of $544,953 for the provision of contract administration and construction inspection services for the water pollution control plant optimization and odor control project. And further, the council authorized mayor and clerk to execute an indemnity and release waiver to fulfill the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority permit conditions for the water pollution control plant optimization and odor control project. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Councillor Clark, then Councillor Herbert.
Thanks, your worship. I just wondered if staff could elaborate for the sake of the viewers, why this is a good way to go, single sourcing. I agree with the choice. It looks like it's going to save us money, and the firm has the expertise because I've done work before, but I was just wondering if we could get a little bit of background on why this is a good move.
Mr. Gillibrand, good to have you here tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. Through you to Councillor Clark. Yeah, so the reasons, like as you alluded to in the report, basically, the consultants were selected through two separate different procurement processes. One's for the optimization project and one for the odor control project, separated by about a year in time. They were successful on both of those bids, so we knew that we were receiving competitive pricing for the design aspect of it. So it leads us to believe that the construction administration inspection component of it is also competitive based on their quote in comparison to other industry standards.
Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, worship. What's the time frame on this? Is this something that's gonna, if we approve tonight, you're gonna start tomorrow, or is it next year's budget?
Through the mayor to Councillor Herbert, the contract has already been awarded to BGL Contracting. So they're already procuring materials and submitting shop drawings. The project is already moving forward. This is some administrative housekeeping, if you will, in order to secure the construction inspection and administrative services once the contractor does fully mobilize onto site. And the other piece of this report is to secure the permit with KCCA. One of their conditions being that a release and indemnity waiver be signed. The other condition being a preventative monitoring program be put in place for some of the active erosion occurring in the area, which we don't have any concerns about anyway. It's a good practice to do as well. So those are the reasons for this report.
Go ahead.
Things just fall. The reason I ask, and it seems like we talk about it for a long time, but the odor control project, it seems like last year we're talking about a project for this year. Because people, still have the odd person ask me, I don't think it's as bad as it ever was, but with the warm weather, but it's always, we talk about it. That's why I asked, what's the time frame to start this? Thank you.
Okay. Kevin?
Through the mayor, I don't believe I actually addressed your question of the time frame, so my apologies. We're looking to mobilize this fall once we have the shop drawings approved and the materials manufactured, but it is a long lead time once those shop drawings are approved for the materials to actually come to site. So the odor control project will likely not be completed until 2026.
Great. Further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Your worship, unless there are any further items from the members.
Councillor Peters has one.
Thank you very much. Question to Mr. Bray. I like to walk around the city down sidewalks, and I'm 6'1" tall. And I find as I'm walking down a sidewalk, and if I'm brushing my head against a tree, others probably are too. It's really noticeable, like today with the heavy rain, everything's sagging. But I recently had a situation with someone who wasn't sure they were aware we have a tree bylaw. And I know we enforce it because I heard from somebody in the north end who had a mail note in his mailbox reminding him that he shouldn't be out trimming the city tree. But on the flip side, some people don't know where their property line is. They don't know this case on Fairview I was dealing with. They couldn't tell if the tree was on their property or on city property. It was on city property, but then he's still not sure, or pardon me, it was on his own property. But he's just not sure. He doesn't want to get himself in trouble with the tree bylaw. So he's concerned about going out and pruning a tree. And do we go out and do tree trimming on sidewalk trees as an example? And B, how do we educate the public as to what they can and cannot do? I know I'm like Councillor Wookie, I'm sometimes an amateur arborist. And, I've trimmed trees for years, taken that bottom row off and that next layer just covers nicely. But, I've got a tree out in front of my neighbor's house right now. I don't know whose property it's on and it's hanging onto the sidewalk. So how do we advise people about tree trimming?
Thank you, Mayor Preston, through you. That's a great question, actually. And we'll put something on social media just as a public interest, but they should just put in an Access 11, E11. It'll get asking for urban forestry. They'll come out and have a look, and regardless if it's a private tree or a publicly owned tree, they will prune it back so it's clear passage on the sidewalk.
Okay, I just want to make sure that gets clearly communicated even within the building, because this person that I dealt with on Fairview was told, just go ahead and trim it.
I doubt that was by an urban forester, but
I think he may have actually been dealing with, I'm not sure where it was, but that's what was communicated to me. So
no, they're happy to come out and have a look and they'll
Perfect.
prune it appropriately into best practice. Thank you.
Mr. Bray, if we start off at customer service, will it get through the levels you're talking about?
Yep.
Someone was just to easily call customer service or email customer service?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, we get, I see all of them coming into my department, and on a daily basis, there's numerous directly dedicated to urban forestry on a variety of reasons.
Super. I saw Councillor Kohler's hand.
Thanks, your worship. I can attest to the customer service and working because I've had quite a few come forward. I was just wondering, do we have a posted schedule of where they go? Like, do we monitor these areas like the sidewalks where it goes down and go through an automatic trimming process? I can't imagine that we're just doing it on customer service, but it has worked great for the last few that have come my way, that they've addressed them pretty much the same day they've gone in.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. They will notify the same day what the intent is when they'll go out. There are areas of town that are scheduled for all city-owned trees to be pruned. It's on about a 4 or 5 year rotation, but they will do the specific one-offs.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Bray. Any other questions on this committee? Seeing none?
We'll now move into corporate governance and administration. First item relates to the municipal funding agreement for the Canada Community Building Fund. I have a motion that report TR 0824 relating to the municipal funding agreement for the Canada Community Building Fund be received for information, and for the council approve the preparation of a bylaw to allow the mayor and clerk, or to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the Canada Community Building Fund agreement. Moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Questions or comments on the Canada Community Building Fund? I'll go to Councillor Clark, then Councillor Herbert.
Just wondering if we could get a copy of Schedule A. Usually by the time the budget gets to us, as the motion says, it's usually been assigned to roads and other projects. And I'd just be interested in, on Schedule A, it mentions the other types of infrastructure projects where the money could be used. And just wondering, why I've never seen that, and be interested to see what else is eligible.
Is that a yes? Yes.
Thanks.
I was just looking to see where the yes was coming from. I got it now. We're okay. Counselor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. Is this 2.8 million for the next 5 years? Is that something, do we balance it over 5 years? Or do we just, if you need $1 million, you just take it? Or is it something we balance over 5 years in the budget?
Mr. Treasurer?
Thank you, through you. That kind of depends. Since we know ahead of time what it's going to be, we'll probably spend all that amount of money each year. In past years, we weren't sure of the amount, so we kind of spent what we thought it would be, and then we make up the difference in the next years. Can I address the previous question? I believe in eScribe, the agreement is an attachment in there. If you click on there, Schedule A should be in there.
It's got both. Okay. Further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Next
Next
item.
item relates to community grants for July 2024. I have a motion that report TR 0924 relating to community grants for July 2024 be received for information, and further that council approve the community grant to Iron Horse Festival operating as Railway City Music and Arts Festival in the amount of $3,500. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Councillor McCauley?
So I believe that this is one of the only multi-day events that happen in St. Thomas. And we do offer $3,500 to many other events that are only one day. And there are significant costs to put this 4-day event on. And I'm just wondering, I mean, if we can only give them up to $3,500, that is fine. But I'm wondering, is there an opportunity to work with the organizers on the park rental fees? Because as I said, there are significant expenses that happen with this 4-day event.
Mr. Treasurer, can you help us on this? We know we set that limit of 3,500 on any one grant. Is that?
Thank you, through you. When we last did the community grants, we said that any city cost would have to be reimbursed through the grants. In the past, we've just forgiven the cost for rentals for facilities, and it reduces the revenue for that department. So we said that any rental fee should be paid for through grants. The policy does have an area for exceptional circumstances. Whether we believe that is fit into this or not, that's available to council.
Go ahead, Councillor McCauley.
Because it is a 4-day event, I do feel it does fit into exceptional circumstances. It brings people to our community, brings people to our park. It certainly, I do personally, I feel it's an exceptional circumstance.
Mr. Treasurer, I understand that we're about as close to empty in this account as we've been at this time of year in the past. Am I correct?
Yeah, we in the last few years, there wasn't as many events. I believe there's around $6,500 left in the account.
Okay, with about half the year left. So. Are you moving a motion?
Yes, I am moving a motion.
Okay. Councillor Baldwin Sands?
I'll second, but I'm going to request from Councillor McCauley, what number is she suggesting?
That's what I would like to know, a specific.
Well, I realize that there may be impacts to if it's more in kind, but I'm wondering if we can compromise, and if it's not, because what is the total is 11,502. And what amount is that for? It's 6,502 for park rental fees. Is that correct? They asked for $5,000 cash and 6,502 for park rental fees for a total grant of 11,502. So could we split the 6,502 with them? and give them the 3,500 cash.
Are you talking a total of 7,000? I'm just guessing, I'm pulling a number.
Yes.
Okay? Discussion and comment on the motion. Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, worship. Well, I can remember back in the days when we'd have 50, 60 people apply for grants and it was a 3-hour discussion. But I think in my mind, the $3,500 is fair because we'll open the door now for everybody who wants to come and get more 4, 5, 6, 7,000 if it's a big event. So anyway, I don't have a problem with the 3,500. I think that's fair when we're getting so low anyway. So anyway, thank you.
Councillor Kohler, then Councillor Clark.
Thanks, your worship. I think it's a great event and I'm going to support the motion, but this is exactly what I said when we spent all that time talking about a policy. Because we're, pretty soon we're going to be back into where we were before, even though we have a policy. Because when the fund is gone and somebody comes forward with another great event, we're going to do this exact same thing. So we might as well get rid of the policy if we're going to continue to do this.
Councillor Clark.
I think we may be able to do this as a one-off though, because through tourism and through the EDC and different, basically, what our last strategic plan, we were trying to come up with more community events. And so when we look at our tour, we had a goal of new events each year. If you look at what other cities do, they actually have a department of culture and they have a manager of cultural and events. And so I think what we should be talking about is the city grows and we look at our budget next year is looking at maybe ways to support these types of events, either through more dollars to our tourism. So I look at this as hopefully a one-off in terms of applying for the grant and that we might be able to fund community events in a different way in the future. So I would support this motion.
Further comments? Councillor Wookie?
Thanks, your worship. I tend to be the policy Grinch, and I'm going to be the policy Grinch again in this one. I think that I'd be pleased to talk about a policy for this. I'd be pleased to see a change in this for these exact circumstances where it's a multi-day event. But I think until we have that discussion, I'm not going to support something that's an exception to policy because, again, I believe in policy and policies than direct action. And I think and with all due respect to Councillor Clark, I just don't see there being one-offs. I would like this to be incorporated and I'd be pleased to support this next year once we've taken a look at this policy. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? I'll go to Councillor Clark, then Councillor Gibson.
Well, it's ironic that we just had a wave of committee of adjustment things where we have bylaws in place for things that are a lot more serious than $3,500. And yet we're going to allow things to go to a committee adjustment. And I'm sure when we hear back from them, they're all going to get accepted. And they're all exceptions to the rules that are going to cost a lot more money and a lot more headaches to people in their neighborhoods than $3,500.
Councillor Gibson?
Thank you, Worship. Just a reminder for those who are listening, the Music Arts Festival is actually the past Iron Horse we used to have on Talbot Street. And it generated quite a big interest into our area, and now it's at Pinafore Park. And I do recall many times when I was on the board 2 years, there was a lot of things that the Iron Horse Festival Committee paid out to. They bought garbage cans, they bought your picnic tables, 40 of them one year, the year I was on. And they also put in some power transformers along Talbot Street. The one I do know was $15,000. So I will agree to the ask, the motion of Councillor McCauley, because I do believe if we don't start supporting some of these events, even the upcoming new events, we're not going to have a very active community. We're going to be back to where we were in the the last few years since COVID. Thank you.
I think I could share, but you would already know where my vision is on grants in particular. But I will be voting yes on this because I think festivals and events in our community are the things we should be paying for with our grant process. I will ask the treasurer to make sure that next year in this conversation of grants, we talk about separating perhaps festivals from other grants for sports teams or something else. And maybe we can look at it different that way. We'd be happy to do it, but we're already compromising some of the dollar amounts that have been asked for. We're meeting them part way. I think it's the right thing to do to get a 4-day festival in one of our parks. So, further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Are there any opposed to the motion? It is carried. Thank you. Next item.
Next item relates to a request for a new supervisor of housing stability services. I have a motion that report SCSS 1224 relating to a request for one additional supervisor of housing stability services be received for information. And further, the council approve the recruitment and hiring of one additional supervisor of housing stability services to commence in August 2024. Moved by Councillor Kohler, second by Councillor Clark.
Questions or comments? Okay, Councillor Baldwin Sands, I saw your first.
Thank you. Every time I read a report, it shows me how much work that we have done in this community, but how much more work needs to be done. And that's why I fully support this.
Thank you. Councillor Wookie?
Thanks, your worship. Yeah, I think I never thought about this, but when I read the report that, having somebody coordinating housing for people who already have housing and somebody coordinating housing for people who don't have housing is in many ways a completely different job with a completely different clientele. So I'm pleased to support that. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that we have enough business to keep those people busy. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Peters?
Thanks, your worship. I understand recently mental health, London, Elgin, Middlesex is cutting 30 positions. Just at a very time when they should be probably investing in 30 more positions.
Yep.
Is any of the work of this individual, are we now picking up slack from CMHA?
I knew we'd get you up sooner or later, Ms. Sharon.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Peters. No, this is completely separate from any work that Canadian Mental Health would be involved with.
But it's another discussion in itself. I'm going to speak again from the chair that we have moved so far, as Councillor Baldwin Sands has said, on housing in our community, that I recognize this has been a extremely good fiscal council at taking a look at not doing it till we absolutely need it. And I happen to agree with the director on this one. We're at the point on housing where, look, and in a discussion that the director and I had this week on this report, I said, but maybe one day, as we remove homelessness from our community, we will no longer need this supervisor. But we're not there yet. And there's so much work going on that we need the work to be done today so that perhaps in the future we actually do completely eliminate homelessness from our community and then work only on the rest of housing under the other supervisors. That being said, further comment? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Your worship, that concludes the committee work as long as there's no further items from the members. And council will now reconvene into regular session. I have a motion that the recommendations, directions, and actions of council and committee of the whole as recorded in the minutes of this date be confirmed, ratified, and adopted. Moved by Councillor McCauley, second by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
We now move into reports of committees. First committee report relates to heritage alteration permit for the property at 225 Wellington Street. I have a motion that report MHC 0624 relating to the heritage alteration permit for the property at 225 Wellington Street be received for information, and further that council issue a heritage alteration permit for the property at 225 Wellington Street relating to application HAP 0524. Moved by Councillor McCauley, second by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to a request for alterations for 225 Wellington Street. A motion that report MHC 0724 relating to the request for alterations for 225 Wellington Street be received for information, and further that council consent to the proposed alterations to install egress doors to the west side of the building as required by the fire code at 225 Wellington Street, and further that notice of council's decision be provided to the Ontario Heritage Trust. Moved by Councillor Herbert. Second by Councillor Wookie.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next is a request for a heritage alteration permit for the property at 750 Talbot Street. A motion that report MHC 0824 relating to the heritage alteration permit for the property at 750 Talbot Street be received for information, and further that council issue a heritage alteration permit for the property at 750 Talbot Street relating to application HAP 0624. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item is a request for alterations for the property at 750 Talbot Street. I have a motion that report MHC 0924 relating to the request for alterations at 750 Talbot Street be received for information, and further council consent to the proposed alterations to install storm windows at 750 Talbot Street, and further that notice of council's decision be provided to the Ontario Heritage Trust. Moved by Councillor Wookie, second by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Last item under reports relates to a heritage alteration permit for the property at 703 Talbot Street. A motion that report MHC 1024 relating to the heritage alteration permit for 703 Talbot Street be received for information, and further the council issue a heritage alteration permit for the property at 703 Talbot Street relating to application HAP 0724. Moved by Councillor McCauley, second by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next, we move into petitions and communications. The first item is a request for a proclamation, flag raising, and jumbo lighting by the Nameless Harm Reduction and Outreach Services. I have a motion that Council of the City of St. Thomas proclaim August 31st, 2024 as International Overdose Awareness Day in the City of St. Thomas, and further that the International Overdose Awareness Day flag be flown at City Hall on August 29th, 2024, and further that the Jumbo Monument be lit in purple in recognition of International Overdose Awareness Day. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands, second by Councillor McCauley.
Questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item is a request to declare a municipally significant event received from Economic Development Corporation for the St. Thomas Oktoberfest event. I have a motion that the St. Thomas Oktoberfest event proposed to be held on September 21st, 2024 in Pinafore Park be deemed a municipally significant event. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Questions or comments? Okay, so all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, but I think you said Pinafore Park. Is this event at Pinafore Park? No, it's a downtown event? Yes.
My apologies, Your Worship. It is on Talbot Street.
Okay, all right.
Next item, an application has been made to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario by Base Notes Lounge for a liquor license for its indoor area at 703 Talbot Street. Council may make representation to the commission concerning the application. Next again, an application has been made to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario by St. Thomas Anglican Church for a liquor license for its indoor area at 20 Flora Street. Council may make representation to the commission concerning the application. Next item, letter has been received from the Catfish Creek Conservation Authority regarding the authority's draft watershed-based resource management strategy. The deadline for submission of any comments about the strategy is July 26, 2024. Next item, letter has been received from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding amendments to the Planning Act and the Development Charges Act brought into effect by Bill 185, Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act 2024. The next item, notice has been received from the Ontario Energy Board regarding an application by Enbridge Gas Incorporated to dispose of the balances of certain deferral and variance accounts effective January the 1st, 2025. A next item, a thank you card has been received from the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority, thanking council for grant and staff for organizational support of the 2024 St. Thomas Elgin Children's Water Festival. Next item, a letter has been received from the Minister of Energy and Electrification regarding the Edgeware Battery Storage Project to be constructed in the city of St. Thomas. Next item, a letter has been received from Sue and Charlie Corvo of 77 Metcalfe Street requesting that the heritage designation be removed from the property. Your worship, I do have a motion that the letter received from Sue and Charlie Corvo requesting that the heritage designation be removed, be referred to the Municipal Heritage Committee for a report, and further that the city clerk be directed to provide notice of the application in the St. Thomas Times Journal. Moved by Councillor Peters, second by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
That concludes the items under petitions unless the members have any further items to add. We'll now move into unfinished business of council.
Any items?
Seeing no items, your worship, we now move into new business of council. Your worship, no items under new business. We'll now move into bylaws. I have a motion that leave be granted to bring in the bylaws. Moved by Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
I have a motion by Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Baldwin Sands, that the bylaws be now read a first time, referred to council and committee of the whole, and read a second time.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. First bylaw, please.
First bylaw is a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held on July 15th, 2024.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Next bylaw, please.
Second bylaw is a bylaw to authorize mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city and 1237166 Ontario Limited. This relates to a grant acknowledgement agreement under the Community Improvement Program for the property at 309 Talbot Street.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Next bylaw, please.
Third bylaw is a bylaw to authorize mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city and RV Anderson Associates Limited. This relates to contract administration and construction inspection services for the water pollution control plant optimization and odor control project.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Next bylaw, please.
Fourth bylaw is a bylaw to authorize mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a release and indemnity in favor of the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority. This relates to a permit also relating to the water pollution control plant optimization and odor control project.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Next bylaw, please.
Fifth bylaw is a bylaw to authorize mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of corporation to a declaration of compliance. This relates to long-term care service accountability agreement at Valley View.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Next bylaw, please.
Sixth and final bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. This relates to the Canada Community Building Fund.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. I rise to report the successful passing of 6 bylaws.
Great.
I have a motion by Counselor Peters, second by Counselor Baldwin Sands, that the report of council and committee of the whole on the 6 bylaws be received and adopted, the same be read a third time, engrossed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and numbered.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next order of business is public notice, no public notice, and also no notices of motion. Your worship, at this time, there is a need to move into closed session. I have a motion that this meeting be closed to deal with information explicitly supplied in confidence to the municipality by the province of Ontario. A position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality, a labor relations matter, and a personal matter about an identifiable individual. Moved by Counselor Baldwin Sands, second by Counselor Gibson.
Before we call the vote, we'll explain to the folks at home and those here that we'll be now moving into closed session. There'll be no further open session. We'll return to open in time to adjourn for tonight. At 6 o'clock, we'll also be doing a public meeting here. So we'll go, should we vote to go into closed and then stop at 6 o'clock for the open meeting? Or should we give ourselves 9 minutes till the public meeting and then do closed afterwards? Okay, sounds like that one works. So do we still vote on closed session? Then all in favor of closed session? Any opposed? Great. I will now recess the meeting to wait for 6 o'clock and the public meeting.